Hello, my name is Frances White, and today I'm going to show you how to do a love bag that I've been giving out to seniors, elders, war vets, and children for their indoor-outdoor walkers and wheelchairs or hospital bed rails. And to start off, because some of you are beginners, I'm just going to let you know how I set my machine up. I'm going to take my needle, and it's right there in the center. I'm going to move it over to the left. So I just go over there. It's on my left. And why did I put it on to the left? Well, I'm going to show you why. I took off my foot, sewing foot, and you can see I have a 1/4 inch little lip there, a little foot. That's going to be my seam guide for everything I'm going to do. Is usually around a 1/4 foot wide. I'm going to put, because this is thin material, I can leave it at my setting at 2.5, but I am going to go to 3. I'll try 3. First of all, we're going to start off with the pocket. Okay, I've did iron it out at one point, but you're going to put them face to face because we're going to turn the pocket inside out when we're finished. So it doesn't matter if it's ragged or not straight at all, but here's a nice straight line. So we'll start with this. We're going to do the bottom seam, so I'm going to leave a space here. I'm going to sew here and leave that empty because that's where we'll turn the pocket inside out. So I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of seam here on the bottom just so that I can tuck it in and it'll be a nice deep seam. Now I'm sewing by my finger, as you can see, because my legs aren't the best, and you people all usually have foot pedals. That's fine if you can control them, great. And you don't have to go fast. You can see I'm going at an even pace, and that's okay because you have more control when you go on the little bit of the slower side. It's up to you, whatever you can manage. Then now I'm sewing across the top, and I'm hoping I'm keeping it pretty straight. Sometimes my seams are not always straight, but that's okay. We'll check it later. How wide did I want it? Oh, I can see it's off a little bit, I think. Anyways, I take my hand, and I want a nice, deep, wide pocket for these purses. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back a little bit. So I just lifted up my foot, and you'll see why. I'm going to go back a little bit just to make sure I've got that seam covered. I'm going to go straight as I can down to the bottom. I'm going to lift that up and eyeball it out. It looks like it should meet up with that pretty close. And again, leaving it open there. I'm going to lift up, and I'm going to cut my ends. Okay, I'm going to turn this over, and you can see it's green, so it's matching that all right. It's hard to see, so we'll go back to this. Okay, I'm trying to see if I've got a square. I think that one's out a little bit, so what I'll do, yeah, don't worry if you're not straight or anything, but do try to be straight as you can. But I seem to have one eye that goes off a bit. I don't know why. There we go. I think that's got it. Okay, we'll lift that up, cut the ends. Well, it looks much better. Okay, we're going to go with that anyway. What I do with my corners is I cut on an angle, 45, and you can see I'm trimming up the side seam, and it's good fat 1/4 inch. Going 45-degree angle there, and just cutting along with my scissors. 45-degree. Again, down this seam, leaving it a good fat 1/4 inch. Come right down to the bottom now. And I'm going to leave it like this. I'm going to pause in a minute so you can either catch up, rewind, or do whatever you want. But I will pause this because this is my first step. Okay, I'm pausing now. Okay, now that you've got your pocket sewn up and looking like this, hopefully, we see that little space I left open. I'm going to pull that apart, or inside out, and when I do, I sort of take my thumb and I kind of, with my other finger, kind of push it up so I can get a nice, almost square corner. Doesn't always work out that way, but with this one it is. I'm going to go to the other corner, do the same thing, kind of push, and I'm going to push it all the way through. And again, I'm going to stick my finger up there and give that a nice point. And my last one is up here. I'm going to, there we go. So I'm pulling it all out. I'm going to pause again because what I'm going to do is I like to iron it and make sure I've got the seam here ironed. So I'm pausing now so you can do that to your little pocket, and I'll be right back. Okay, back again. You've just turned your pocket inside out, and I hope you had an iron handy and you just gave it a bit of an iron. And you remember the little hole that we've got to, that we pulled it inside out. So I ironed it so it made it nice and close to it. So when I sew it, it's not going to be off too much. So I'm going to flip it over. And what I'm going to do, because I like to keep this a little bit neat with a little stitching, just go along the top, about 1/4 inch. Now I go backwards and forwards to lock the stitch, back stitch it's called. I'm going to go right along the top. This makes a better pocket. And I'm going to back stitch here, lock the stitch, lift up my needle, and now I'm going to cut my little tails. So I just want them cut close to the material. So flipping it over here. Okay, this is the lining, so that it's going to be sitting on the lining. That's going to be the dark green. It's going to be sitting like that on it. Okay, we're pausing now, and I'll show you how to put the outer pieces together. Okay, now we've got the outer shell, 2 pieces. You've got the back piece and the front piece. I've ironed it because it's much easier to work with things when you iron them in the beginning, middle, and end. You'll see how that goes. So what I'm doing is placing the front piece face to face on the back piece. Just try to make sure it's covering all nicely. And also I'd like from this corner to that corner a good 2 inches, 2.5, 3 inches. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. So if you think that's too short, just take your scissors and cut around here a little bit if you want. But I'm thinking that might be okay. Now the next step in this is fold it in half. And when I say fold it in half, just check up here where you cut out the pattern and just make sure it's all together straight in half. I'm going to take my scissors, and I think it's deep enough, but I'm going to go around a corner here and kind of cut a little bit on diagonal. As you can see, I'm going right up to the little armpit. I call it the armpit because there's a little curve there, and I really don't know what else to name it. I'm going to cut here so that everything is even. Now I'm going to flip it over and just make sure it's even. Okay, I see I have a little short piece here on this. So we're just going to correct that. Just go down a little bit. And cut it how you'd like to see it in the end. But that's how I'd like to see it. So as you can see, I fold it in half. Now we're just going to open it all up. There we go. And if you feel like you want to pin it, you can pin it there if you want. But I think mine's okay. Okay, so you can see the size and the shape it's going to be once we do our seaming. So I'm going to take my foot, let it down, and I'm going to go forward and a little bit backwards just to lock those stitches. There we go. And I'm using quite a wide seam here because I think I've got enough room to do that. We can trim later. Coming around the corner and try to keep straight. Hopefully I am. You could always measure later and see if I'm straight or not. Around the corner and sort of up on that slant. When I get to the top, I'm going to back stitch to lock those stitches. There we go. Lift up the needle and the foot and cut. How I'm going to check this is I'm going to fold it in half again and just kind of watch where my sewing is going, all the stitching. So it looks like it's following. I'd say I've got it pretty close there. Now we're ready for one of our trims. And I kind of like to keep it a little bit at the top, out a bit, but then I like to go down a little bit and just keep a nice fat 1/4 inch away. Hitting the corners, I'm going to notch them. When I notch, I don't go right up to the stitching. I leave a little gap there. And why do I notch? This is to take the stress off the material and make it lay flat when it's finished. I'm going to trim the bottom a little bit, again to the 1/4 inch seam. Coming up to another corner, I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, I don't like my ragged cutting there. Let's fix that. Okay. All right, we're at the corner again. We're going to notch. Again, I don't go right up to those stitches. If you do and you cut through it, you're on the good side right now. You're inside out. You can fix it by restitching a little bit away from it and just make your bag a little bit smaller. That's okay. And there's you go. Okay, we're going to pause right now so you can see how I've stitched it. I've notched the both corners. And we'll do a pause right now till you finish what you're doing with yours. Okay, pausing. Okay, we're back now with the lining. I ran out of lining, and so I've got 2 pieces here. I'm going to join it together to make the lining for the front. So you're really, when you got the bag, you're not even going to notice the seam that I will have in there. But this is what I have to do to keep this material all the same in the lining color. So I'm just going to go up here a little bit, go back a little bit, lock the seam, lock the stitches, and I'm just going nice pace and nice. And I ironed all this beforehand, so it's easier to work with. It lies flat for you when you iron it. As I said, this is the inside, the outside piece, but it's going to be the front inside lining. I stopped there only because this is the same size as the other piece, so I'm just going to shorten this to make sure it's going to be the side that I want, the front piece inside. There we go. I'm just going to open this up. And I'm going to pause for a second right here because what I'm going to do is go iron that. So just sit there and I'll be right back. Okay, this is the one piece that is going to be the back. Right now our next step is to put a pocket on it. So we're going to take the outer shell that we did before. We're going to put this big back lining on it. We're going to flip it over and we're just going to place it nicely in there. We're going to put pins in it to stabilize it, so when I'm playing around with it and shifting it, the materials won't shift and get into the wrong places. So I've put a pin on to stabilize it. Then I put a pin on the outside of that just to show me where it was before. Getting 2 more pins. Same on this side, of course. Just pin it, and again, where the seam comes to meet its edge, I just put a pin in there so I know where to put it. I take my scissors and I just come up to where it is and just kind of go off to the side because I'm just making a little place to go back to. These are marking places that I'm doing, and I call it the armpit where I'm cutting. Okay, we're going to flip that over and we're going to place the pocket on there. So our pocket we've done. This is the top where we put the stitches in. And we want to place it a little bit above here at the bottom. So you just eyeball it, do your own thing, and you'll figure out where you want it. Now, to make it even, I'm going to take out the stabilizing pins for now. And I'm just going to measure this way. I'm going to bring in the material. I'm going to eyeball it here. It looks like it's pretty good, but this side looks a little wider, so I'm just going to pull this over a tad like that. Okay, we're ready to sew, so we'll take that away. We're going to sew the pocket on. Okay, we're going to back stitch, and you can go in as deep as you want, but I usually go about 1/4 of an inch or even closer to the edge. I'm going to go backwards a little bit to get this locked on my material. So I've got about 1/4 of an inch there. At the bottom, though, I don't do a whole 1/4 of an inch, but you can. But I just go a little bit deeper to make sure I've got everything sewn together. Okay, lifting up the lever. I think I'm just going to pull it over there a little bit. Okay, let's go. Again, just go at your own speed that you're comfortable with. Even if it's slower than that, that's fine. I sewed a bit on the lining material and I went backwards to lock the stitches, lifting up my needle. And I'm going to cut my threads. You don't want any little piggy's tails, we call them, sticking out anywhere. So cut them on the inside. You won't see them, but there. And I'm going to pause in a second just so that you can get your pocket all sewed on there. So we placed it, we checked it out, we went down the seam and back. Now, even at the bottom of this, you'll see some loose little threads. I have little embroidery scissors that I take and I try to cut the little piggy's tails so you're not going to see them. When you're doing work, you want to do the best you can. You want something nicely done. There, that looks better. Okay, I say we've got it all on, and I'm going to pause now for you to do your pocket and catch up with me. Okay, we've assumed you've got your little pocket on there. Now, we're going to do the next step, which is taking your outer shell or your bag that's still inside out, it's not proper yet, and we're going to place this on there. And why we put those pins in there, we're going to measure and make sure everything matches. So your needle, your pin is there and your pin is on the other side. We take out the pin because it's placed where it should be. We take out this pin and pin it. We're going to flip it over like that. I'm going to take the piece that we sewed together to make a whole lining piece. Okay, so I've ironed it. This is face up. We're going to put them face to face. So what I see is that. Now, again, we're going to do some pinning. So we take out that pin, pin it all together. Same on the other side. Okay, this will all make sense to you in a few minutes. Then we're going to flip it over again, and we're going to do some trimming so it makes it easier for what the next step is of what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to trim up the sides a good ½ inch away. I'm going to get these trimmed. I'm going to go around to the other side. Again, cutting at that armhole little piece, and then a good ½ inch all the way around. You'll see why in a second when we do the next step. I'm going to pause in a minute so that you can get what I've just showed you done on yours. Okay, so there we go. That's what you're going to be looking at. And I'm going to pause here so you can catch up. You've got that. We're going to flip it over again, and you've got the seam. Don't worry about the seam. You've got this on this side. You're going to take 4 pins, and I always take 2 little pins for my corners, as you'll see what I'm going to do. So there's my little pins. So what we're going to do is, you can see the stitching I did, and this is the lining that goes inside the bag. So we want it pretty close to the stitching. So I've got it right on this, next to the stitching there. I'm going to go down here and bring it out about 1/16 of an inch, as you can see. Then I'm going to finger press. Finger pressing is so that you can see the line when I flip it over, and the heat and the pressure from your fingers helps to make a line. Going to take the large pin with my left hand. I'm right-handed, but if you can learn to use your left hand, this will save you a lot of grief, because it's so much easier. Okay, I'm going to put 2 pins on this side, right in the crease. I'm going to turn it because here's our corner. There's the stitching. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit, about almost 1/4 of an inch, not quite. And I'm going to use my little pins for the corner. All right, so when I'm sewing, I'll know when to do the turning to get to the bottom line. Okay, well, now we're on the bottom. So we're taking this up, and again, we're just giving it a little bit of wiggle room. We're not touching that stitching, but we're giving it a little space, almost very close to it, and we're doing the finger pressing again. Okay. And we're going to put 2 pins in the bottom, so this will guide our stitching. And the secret to this whole purse is leaving a space here, a big gap. So when I finish sewing here and on the other side, and we trim it one more time and we pull it inside out, it gives me room to pull it all inside out, that little gap, because we're not going to sew on that little gap. We're going to leave it empty, as you'll see in the next demonstration. Just putting in my pins along that line. Into the corner now. Again, just up a little bit, finger press, and put in the little pin. Okay, now we're on this side. Where are the pins we need? One's way over here. We can release that one. Again, you go up to the top, under the armpit there. We put it next to the stitching. Bring it down, have it away from the stitching a little bit. Just a little wiggle room inside your bag. Then you finger press, you press hard, and the heat from your fingers makes it press so closed. Then I can see the little indentation, the crease that it made. We're pulling out that needle, knit pin, and we're putting it right close there. All right, I'm going to pause and let you catch up with me now. You've got that all pinned, and if you look underneath, you still got your outer shell. Please take that away, or you'll end up sewing right onto it, which I have done. And that's why we have seam rippers, which are a great invention. Okay, so you line up. I can still see my crease under all this little lighting. So I'm going to put my needle on that crease very carefully. I'm going to go forward a little bit. I'm going to go backwards to lock the stitch. And here we go. I can see the crease. Maybe you can't. And if you're removing a pin, you can put your finger there just to keep your eyeball on the right spot. Going down, and I'm going around this corner. Again, I remove the pin because you don't want to ride over it. Put my finger there to give me an idea. You don't have to be perfect on this end, but it's nice to do your best. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there because I want a gap. Remember the gap? Okay, I'm going to lift my needle. I'm going to lift this all up and just kind of go forward to the next spot. Put my finger there to show me where I gotta go, and we're going around the other corner. I'm pulling it out, putting my finger there just to show me that where I have to go. Sometimes you'll see the pinhole right in the material, and that's a big help as well. Putting my finger there, taking out that pin, and just going up this crease. The crease is showing up, but it's not that visible. Okay, we've hit this last pin, and we're just going to go up and back to lock the stitch. And I'm going to pause here for now because I want you to catch up to this one stops. I hope you're caught up there. If you're not, take your time. That's what this video is all about. You can pause it and take your time, or come back another day. It's up to you. Okay, we're at the point now we're going to again do a trim on this. So I leave it a little bit wide at the top. I go down about around the seam about 1/4 inch, and we've reached the corner, and you know what we do on the corners, the outward corners. We do a notch here and there till we figure, oh, that's okay. Now we're going to go across here. That's the gap, remember? And we're hitting another corner, again back to notching. And again, if you go past the stitching and kind of separate it and break it there, you can always sew. This is a good spot to correct anything and redo things, so you can always re-sew. That looks pretty good. I just want to cut a few of my threads, make it a little bit neater. Okay, I'm just going to pause now and let you catch up, because you've sewed it, you left the space, and then you went and trimmed. So I'm going to pause now to get ready for the next step. You've done that. The next step is taking your lining, and you put your hand through that little space and you pull it inside out. There we go. As you're pulling it out, you've double stitched it here, so it's not going to come apart on you, but I do want you to sort of pull at your seams. Why are you pulling at your seams and shaping them? It's to make it lay flat and make it easier to put into the bag, of course. But around all the seams, you just pull it out, stretch it out. And then we just kind of put it back in shape. There we go. All right. We take our outer shell, we lay it on the table, and this is the back, this is the front, this is the back, and that's the front. And we're going to put it face to face inside there, so it's going to go in like that. And I'm just going to put my hands in there and kind of feel around, make sure I've got it right in there. So I'm going to pull on it and get the corner down there, pull on it and get the corner down there. When you do that, you should have your seams right at the top of each armpit, so they are matching up. Now, while you do that, I'm just going to make sure it feels right in there. While I do that, I'm going to pause now and let you catch up with me on placing your lining inside the outer shell. Good. Now for the next step, as I said, you've got your corner down there, your two pieces are even, and what I do is that this side I put to the left, this seam, this 1/4 inch little seam, I put to the right, and I make sure that the lines are right on top of each other. There we go. Then I take my pins, I'm going to pin them. There we go, those are done. I'm going over to the other side. Same thing exactly. Make sure it's all down there nice and straight. And that this is to the left, my inner lining one's to the right. That it's right on the seam. They're lined up, and I'm going to pin those little pieces down. Okay, once you've done that, I'm just going to go a little bit further. I'm going to pause so you can get caught up. I'm just going to put my hand in here. Just make sure it's all nice and snug and flat before I go on with my next step. I'm just making sure where the pocket is that it's straight across. That looks pretty good. I think I'm all right. Okay, I'm going to pause here and let you catch up with me on that step. As I said, you put your hands in here, everything felt snug and down at the bottom and at the sides, which feels real good. Your pocket feels straight to you, and you've got those 2 pins on holding down those little seams. The next step is we want to pin these 2 pieces to the outer shell so they won't move while we're sewing the next step. So I'm taking a pin, putting it in my right hand, and I'm sort of just kind of holding that seam and pulling it taut. And I'm putting a pin in there just to keep it from bunching up. Going over to the next side, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm taking the pin in my left hand so that I can pull it taut and put the pin in. It's much easier if you can pick up on that left hand and use it, and a lot of people, you can do it. Okay, now this is the neck part, so we're going to put in 3 pins in this just to keep it all straight. So I'm going to put in that and another one near the top. Okay, it feels pretty good. I've got it taut. We're just going to now do the other side. So again, we flip it over, putting our hands in there just to make sure it all lays flat and straight. Taking our pins. Again, the same thing. I've got 3 pins in there now. Now I'm going to put in this pin here just to hold it taut so it doesn't bunch in my armpits. Taking the pin in my left hand, and I'm pulling it taut there, and I'm putting in the pin to hold it straight again. Okay, coming up here, I'm going to put in 3 pins to hold it. Using my right hand this time on all the pins. Okay, we're ready. Next step, I'm going to pause here just to let you catch up and look at the video again, what I've been doing, so you know where to put your hands, where your pins are going. So I'm going to wait for you, just give you a little pause here. Now, I don't know if you could see this, but I'm going to open it up a little bit wider. But can you see where I first put those 2 pins and then we put our hands down, pulled it taut, and we put the other pins in? Because that stretches it out nice. And when we sew around there, you're not going to have bunches. So that's one side. The other side is the same thing. It doesn't matter where your pin's going. It's just as long as you got your seams, the pin, and both sides. Again, you're keeping it straight and it's not going to bunch up on you. Okay, there we go. Now we're doing some sewing. Again, if you make mistakes here, this is where before the last step is you correct anything that you want to correct. So we're going to start now here. I'm going to sew over my pins, but I'm going to go slow so that you don't break a needle or anything. You can sew over pins, but it's stop and go very slow. So I'm a nice bit away, and I'm going to go now, stopping to go over the needle. There we go, the pin. Now, you'll see me pull it out every so often just to straighten it out and pull it taut, because we don't want our wrinkled lining. This you're going to follow until you want to do a different corner, but you follow this seam up, and I'm staying quite a bit away from mine, but you do whatever you want. You'll see why I stay away quite a bit. Now I'm not going to follow this exactly, and I don't like this pin. It's kind of bunching me up a little bit, so I'm pulling it out, putting my fingers down there, holding it taut or just gentle, and I'm going to go around this corner. Going around these corners does take practice, and I'm not always perfect, but this is the time when we're checking it, we can always change it or fix it. So don't you worry about your corners. Practice makes perfect. Again, I'm stopping, pulling it all taut to make sure everything's gonna sit right when we sew. Coming down to the armpit. Again, I'm stopping, kind of pulling it all out. I call this the camel's hump because it does get in the way, and I think, oh my goodness, get away from me, please. All right, now I'm just going to go down here and stop on these needles. I keep saying needles, I'm sorry, they are pins. I'm going to turn a little bit, stopping and going. There, we're safely over the pins. Okay, again, I'm stretching it all out because I want it nice and flat. Okay, and I'm a good piece away from my edging. It almost looks like half an inch, wouldn't you say? So it could be half an inch around the corner. I don't think I got that one done very well, but that's all right. We can fix all this now. So, and your first few ones you make of these aren't going to be perfect, but once you practice a few, you soon get the hang of it. Getting a needle, coming over here to the armhole, and I'm just going to go over my old stitching so it's kind of locked. There we go. Okay, lifting it all out. Cutting this. All right. The next step we're going to do here is just remove all the pins, and then I'll pause again for you to catch up with me. So I'm just going to take out the pins using my left hand. Comes in handy using your left hand once you get the hang of that. Don't say you can't do it. You can do it. Okay, so we've done all that. We've laid it out here. And I'm going to pause now just so you can catch up on sewing all the way around. Okay. You've caught up to me there. Now the next thing is trimming. You don't want all this big bunch of lining. I make my linings quite big to give me room to make sure I haven't got it real close to this outer layer, because I just want room, and if I have to do anything, it's just me. I'm a big sloppy cutter. We're trimming, but as you see, I'm putting my hands underneath where I'm trimming because I don't want to catch up the bottom piece accidentally and cut a hole somewhere. And yes, oh yeah, done that. So, gotta be careful. Again, we're going around this front piece, cutting carefully, just to trim. You don't have to be real neat on this side. As I said, you're not going to see this, but nice to do a neat job if you can. Much easier for yourself when you're sewing and cutting. Some threads came away there that I had. Hitchhiker, get rid of that. Turn it once more. Now the last seam here. And let's see. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, I'm going to pause again because I want you to catch up to where I'm at on that step. You're just trimming with your hand underneath. So, yes, I've cut my finger. Yep, so be careful. Oh, okay. Okay, you've caught up to me again, and we're going to cut the notches in the top of our round pieces on the neck. And I turn it to the side where I can see my stitching. Whoops, I forgot one thing before we even do that. It's me bad. Okay, all I want to do right now is check to make sure that the corners kind of come down and match. Like there's the top of my corner at the small side. Taking my finger, and it's not quite. This is out too much on, and this side's nice. So what I'm going to do is copy that side. I'm going to correct it. So I'm going to put my foot down there, and I'm going to bring it around and cut a piece off the side. And hopefully my corner round piece looks okay. Well, let's check that and find out. I'll check it on the side I can see. I would say I've got it. It seems to be okay. And I'm taking that big piece off so it looks a little more even on both sides instead of being cockeyed. Again, I'm trimming with my fingers underneath just to be safe and make a nice trim. Okay, let's check that again. So up there, feels good. But again, this piece is a little bumpy right there. And it, believe it or not, it's going to show when I put it inside out. So I'm just going to smooth out that little bump. There we go. Oh, I didn't quite catch it. This will happen to you. I'm going to go down a little bit more. See if I caught it that time. Yeah, that looks a little better. These are the little improvements you can do while it's inside out. Because once you turn it over and say that's it, that's it. Okay, so again, I'm going to trim off some of these piggy tails, make it fall straight. Just kind of trim a little bit. Okay, again, we're going to go back to notching. I think we're all right now. All right, we're going to just do some notching so that when it's pulled inside out and it's inside, when you stretch out the material, it will stretch out. It won't bunch up on you, making it rumply and bunched up. You want a nice smooth neck on your love bag. And I'm again turning over to the light side because I can see where my stitching is. And you can start anywhere you want on your curve. You can go way down if you want. I just go a little bit, make sure I've got the curve. Again, I'm not going right up to the stitching, as you can probably see. And again, if you do cross over and cut it accidentally, that's all right. Just put it down and re-sew. You'll be fine. Okay, got rid of those. Now, we're going to slash. Oh, I see a piggy tail there. There we go. Another one here. Oh, it's already cut. Get rid of those. Okay, slashing. I pull my bag apart. And again, my hand is underneath there, my fingers. And we're going to slash. Again, this is for the same reason, to make it nice and flat. So you see I'm not quite up to the stitching. Again, if you go through, you just re-stitch and make sure both sides look even so they match. So I'm just doing this for when you stretch it all out. At least it's going to not bunch up on you. Okay. So we're just doing the slashing part. It may have another name, I don't know, but I call it slashing. Okay, we're going to the other side. My fingers are underneath, holding it up. And sometimes we have different scissors for different jobs, and that's me. One for trimming, one for cutting, one for slashing. Whatever I can get away with that's comfortable in my hands, or lets me do a quicker job of it, I use. It's all up to you. You'll have your favorite scissors eventually. Okay, we've got all that done. What I'm going to do is pause now to let you do the notching and the slashing and the trimming, whatever you haven't done. And I'm going to pause right now and get back to you in a second, couple of seconds. Welcome back. You finished slashing and cutting your little notches out. So then we're going to put our hand down to where that little bottom piece is, pull it through, and remember the hole we left, that little gap? Well, there it is. That's the whole secret to the whole thing. And we're going to push it all inside out, or right side out, whatever you want to call it. And again, before we had pulled all that apart, like stretched it out, again, now these are new seams. So we're, oh, little hitchhiker. We're going to do the same with this bottom piece that we've just done. We're going to stretch it out, put our fingers in there around that curve. Keep going. Keep stretching it out, pulling it flat. There's that curve for that piece. There, it's all done. Now we're going over to the two necks. There'll be one top of the pocket. This will be the long one. So we do that, put our fingers in there, give it a stretch. Over to the other side. Same thing, pull it out, stretch it up. And you see that seam in there? You're not even going to notice it. And I did that because I ran out of the lining, and I thought, well, I could do that. They're not going to, people who don't sew, they'll like that. Okay, so what you've got here is this piece and this piece. And what you want to do is make sure it's nice and flat. It's going, you pulled out your seam here. So you got hold of that, pulled out your seam there, and you want to sew right across. But you want to iron that to make sure when you're sewing it doesn't slip or bend. So what I'm going to do is just wait for you, and we're going to pause right here, and I'll go over to my ironing and just iron that. And then when you come back, I'll be ready to show you the next step. Back again, and I've ironed this little piece here, this gap that is open. So I'm going to sew, but I'm going to go over about a good inch and start my sewing at the very bottom there on a little angle, and I'm going to go up and back to lock the stitch. There we go, and I'm going to stitch as close as I can to this gap that we have here. All right, there's the end. We're going to go over on a little slant. Going to go backwards and lock the stitch. That looks good. Okay, lifting. Taking my embroidery scissors that I like to cut on small things. So there's one cut. And the other cuts down here. Now I see some piggy tails all sticking up, so I want to correct that. I want to also check the other side to make sure I've caught the seam, and it looks like I have, so it looks good. But now, as you can see, I've got little piggy tails, so I'm taking the embroidery scissors that are very sharp and get close to the material. A lot of you are shaking your head and say, well, nobody's going to see it. Well, that's okay. I just want to make it nice and neat, that's all. You're still going to see a few ends here and there, but I'm just trying to make it nicer looking. That's all nice and neat. That looks a little better. And on here, they're gone there, so we're okay. Okay, so that didn't take you very long, and when we pause, it won't take you very long. This looks a little crooked. It could be. I could be off a little bit, but the person getting the bag isn't really going to notice that. I do, but anyways, now we're going to poke the lining into the outer shell. So I start at the armholes and I kind of poke down there, get the other little armhole. If you can think of another better name for it, please let me know. Okay, so I'm going to put my two hands in there, kind of wiggle it around, make sure I've got it nice and neat. My next step is going to be pulling it all out here with a little pin, so I've got it rounded out nice and I can press that. But what I'm going to do is pause just to let you catch up with me, and we'll wait. We'll see you when you get back. You can see I'm not very round there, so what I do is I take one of the pins, and this is important. You have to get these little side seams. They have to be right out. Did you see that? Pop right out. See, that's in, that's out. And if you want, you can leave a little pin in there just to hold it, or press it with your fingers. That's called finger pressing. I'm going to take another pin, and I don't think this is all out properly, so we're going to pull it all out. Top here. It's not perfect. I see that. Okay. As I said, practice makes perfect. When it's done, you don't really notice, but do try and get your corners and roundness nicer than mine. I'm going to leave a little pin in there just for now. I'm going to go to the other side and see what we got there. So again, I'm going to use a little pin. Make sure I've got these side pieces out. You saw it pop out. This looks pretty good, but I'm going to make sure. Oh, it came out a little bit. See, that's a better corner. We're going to go down here. You can try doing this with your fingers like I'm doing. And just make sure that you've got it nice and even on your seams. I'm going to put a pin in there. See a little hitchhiker? Take that off. Okay. I'm going to go over to the ironing board, and I'm just going to iron this here. And when I go to iron this here, I'll be taking out the pins. But I just want to do the tops. Just iron them down. Then I'm going to, as I go over to the ironing board, I'm going to make sure these are all nice and straight. And I put it down like that, and I take my iron. I iron. Then I make sure this is pretty smooth here. Iron. And same thing with here. If I have to get the pin out to pull out those sides, make them even, and then I'll iron here. So that's one side all done. So all you want when you're doing this, you don't want one way over the other. You want them even. You just want them pulled back like that. Just even like that. So you've got that one side, then you're just switching over to the other side. Same thing. If you need your little pins to bring it even, you do that, or your fingers. Put it down. Again, iron. Iron, straighten out, and iron. And that's all iron. So I'm going to pause now. I'm going to go to the ironing board, do mine. And in the meantime, if you want to sit there and get yours ready, and you can iron yours, and I'll show you the next step. So we'll pause right here. I've just ironed it, and we're going to now do the top stitching. I'm going to leave my length at 3. I think 3 is going to be fine on this. It could be a 2, but it's kind of tiny. And I go down to the little armpit, the armhole, whatever you want to call that curve, and I stretch it out. And it depends on you how wide you want to make it. Please make it a good 1/4 of an inch until you come around to the top of the curves, and I'll show you what we do there. So we're just going to start a little bit. We're going to pull all this out because we don't want to catch any yeah, I've caught the sewing underneath. Good old stitch ripper. Again, just go at your own pace because you're trying to make this pretty well even, and this is kind of hard to do. Then as you see, I narrowed down around the top here. It lays better when it's got the button in the buttonhole. It just looks neater. So I do come in closer. And as I come around, I sort of go out again. Okay, again, straightening it all out. Pushing that camel hump out of the way. I don't like the way this is curved in on me. I did something wrong when I was ironing. So I'm just going to pull it out with the needle, pin. Okay, it looks pretty good there. All right. Okay, again, we pull it all straight. This is the little armpit again. I'm going to go in there. And I'm going to lift my needle this time and kind of push the material around a little bit. Okay. Going up the last leg. Okay, we're out 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to go in a little bit just to make this flap a little bit neater looking and to lay it down a little bit better. Checking my side, it looks all right. Okay, we're going to go out to the 1/4 inch again. Just going to straighten this out, pull out those pieces of thread and straighten it up here. And I'm going to overlap the threads. I'm going to sew right on top of those, that seam, that thread there. Okay, again, pulling it out, trimming very close to the material, very carefully. You don't want to cut a hole in the material. And I know this is dark to see, but I can see it. My goodness, I have big fingers, so it's hard to pick up the thread. Did I get it? Maybe I got it already. Looks like I've got it. Okay. That's that step. And I already ironed all over mine and both sides, so it's come out quite nice. And remember the seam inside for the lining? It's in the middle, and it's quite neat looking. And people, when they're in their bag with their pockets, look, let's take a look at the pocket. Pocket looks just slightly off a bit, but the person using it may not notice it. But the seam from here to here, the measurement looks good. Pocket is nice and deep. And again, as the button's going to go here, the buttonhole is going to go there, and it's going to be flipped over like that. Well, when they're using their bag, that's not going to bother them. So if you run out of your material and you have to do that on either piece, it's not bad because they're not really going to notice it. Okay, I'm going to pause here and get out my buttonholer. Now, a lot of you people aren't going to have the buttonholer attachment or the buttonholer instructions on your machine. That's okay, because you can make buttonholes by hand, and some of you who already have done that, you know how, and others I'll kind of give you a showing in verbal words. Okay, I'm going to pause now and get out my attachment. Okay, I've gotten out my little doodad attachment for making buttonholes. This is my finished product, but I want to do a buttonhole, and I want to sew a button on. I collect buttons from everybody I can and try to match it up, and I think that's a pretty good green for this. So that's going to be the buttonhole. So how big do I want, how long do I want the buttonhole? Well, let's see. This usually goes in there, and I just push up here, and I've got the proper length. So I'm going to take off that presser foot, and I'm going to put on the buttonhole attachment. There, it's clicked in. Now I'm going to pull down. Mine's a machine that automatically makes them for me, so I'm pulling down at the back a little lever that follows it. I'm going over to my buttons on my machine, and I'm going to scroll sideways to number 104 on mine. There we are, and hit that button. Okay, it's already set up. I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to fold this piece under so I don't get it caught. I'm going to go up here, and I have to figure out where I want my button to sit, because I don't want it way down there and I don't want it way up there. So the button where I sew it is, I've got to look where to. This takes practice with your eyes, and I don't always get it right, but let's hope for your sake I get into a nice spot. This is the center of it for measuring, so you kind of eyeball it here. Eyeball it at the top, eyeball it here in the center. Push this down, and my little button says green to go. So I'm going to hit that. And it'll sew the size I want. I pull a little bit back on this because I don't want a real tight zigzag stitch. Going down the other side. Okay, so I'm pulling back again a little bit. That's my buttonhole. Lifting that up, pulling this out, and taking my little embroidery scissors. I'm going to cut all my little threads very close by, so it's quite neat. That looks good. Now a lot of you are going to say, because I'm going to bring up now my buttonhole scissors are special for making buttonholes. But if you don't have the proper scissors, you just make a little hole, fold it, and you can cut it with this or any other little scissors. But this is buttonhole scissors. They're $50. They're very expensive, so you don't have to buy that. But I've had it for many years. And it just kind of goes over this little lip here, and I push it down into the material, and I just go like that. But again, you can do it your own way. I just want to say that if you don't have a buttonhole attachment, all you do is take your button and draw a little line, how wide it is, a little line straight down there. And you take your scissors and you do a little cut. And then you just sew by hand all the way around your button hole that you cut out. And before you sew it up, make sure your button fits through that. Well, I'm going to take off my attachment because I'm finished with it. And I'm going to take out the button and make sure I've got it long enough for this button. It goes through very easy, as you see. The next step is me just sewing this on. So I'm going to let you watch me sew on the button, because I have a certain way that I even do my button. So let's get some thread out, and where I get the thread to match is from what I've been sewing with, so from the machine, of course. And it's the green thread I've been using all along, so I'm just going to pull enough out here to double it, cut it, and I'm just going to thread it and put this button on for you so you can see where I'm going to place it. Now what I do with my thread is I pull it so it's double. I make it even at the ends. I wet my fingers and I twirl it around my finger. I roll it and pull it, and there's my knot. It's not a neat knot, but it's a good knot. Then how I start my sewing with this is I measure that. That's where I'm going to be sewing right there. That's where the middle of the button's going to be. So I want to kind of line it up that it's centered. Bring in my threads, my needle, bring it back out, and I'm going to go through it like that so that that little knot will never go through, because I've sort of got it tied and then this going through it. All right, so we know where we're going to be sewing, and now we can sew the button on. A lot of you people know what button shanks are. You've seen buttons, not flat like this, but they have a little piece of plastic down with a hole through it. That's called a shank. The shank is made for materials that are thick. Like you'll see a lot of buttons with shanks on winter coats or heavy thick material or jackets. Okay, we've got it in a nice spot, and I'm going to go through it about 5-6 times because I want to make it strong there, because this is what's holding your weight of your bag. This is what is the focal point, because we want to make sure that it's strong. So I'm going to do 5 or 6. This buttonhole is so small I can't even find it. So I'll go through the back, and there we are, looking for it. So this is number 3. Okay. This is number 4. It's number 4. This is stitch number 5 to keep that buttonhole from moving around. I'll do one more. I think I can get one more in there. If I can find that hole again. My goodness gracious, there we are. Not all buttons are this tough to put on, of course. There. I think that's 5, whatever. It looks really good there. You can see a nice, and on the back, I don't know if you can pick that up, but you can see it's pretty strong. Then what I do is I go right close to the stitching going in underneath the button. And this is what a shank is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll do it. So you've got it wrapped around the threads that are going to give it more strength. Now you just go back down through the material close to the where you've sewed the buttonhole. Then you turn it over and you do 3 on top here, just little stitches. This needle is so big I'm having trouble with it. That's why it's having trouble going through the broadcloth. That's stitch number 1 that I can see. Stitch number 2 and stitch number 3. And then I take this little bit and all I do is go under between the 2 pieces. I check here to see if I can see the needle or thread. No. Just pull this through and do a little quick snip. And you've hidden the thread away. And we're just going to see what it looks like in the end. And it's not bad, really, when you look at it. It's nice and deep to go over the handlebar of a little walker. And I would have liked it down a little bit more, but that's not bad. And now you see why I went down close to the thing, just to keep it neat. And that's your bag. It looks crooked here, but when you hang it on anything, that'll all straighten out and it'll hang nice, so you'll be all right. So there you go. And you can make the bags a little bit wider, deeper, bigger, whatever you want, as long as your material can hold it. You can use upholstery material. I use that for the outing side, and then I put a thin inside one, and it gives it more body and holds it nicer for people. And if you're going to do one for a wheelchair, the wheelchair arm is a bit twice as thick as your indoor walker bars. An outdoor bar sometimes, but on both of the outdoor walker and your wheelchair has a thicker place for the neck to go over. If that's the case, when you're cutting out both your pattern and your lining, maybe you want to go another 2 inches longer, so it gives you a nice curve that'll cover the armhole and the bar nicely, and that your hand still can fit in there, because men's hands are bigger, right? But this one's really good for your indoor and outdoor walker, I would think. I think it would go all right. Some hitchhikers there. Okay. Now, you people out there that have just watched this, my name is Frances White. I'm 80 years old, and I live in Keswick, Ontario in Canada.